Hello, subscribe to Life Stories, so you don't miss new stories. It's been 10 years since I last went to a job interview, but here I am at the age of 44, and I've decided to continue doing what I love. My name is Alex Price, and I'm a mechanical design engineer. I'm new to the area. And to be honest, this company used to be one of my biggest competitors. I have a feeling they will offer me a job. When they see what I have to offer them, hopefully things will fall into place soon. Unfaithful. I met Holly in 1993, and even now I can picture her. At that time she was beautiful and very self-confident. I, on the other hand, was shy and introverted. I guess being raised by an overbearing mother has that effect on a boy. He also had help from his sisters Megan and Anna, who bullied me throughout my childhood. Megan was the oldest, 13 years older than me, and Anna was 10 years older. Apparently, I was a mistake, and I wasn't planned. All I was blamed for. My parents split up. My father left home in 1977 when I was 5 and never came back. It wasn't until recently that I learned the truth. Go ahead. Mr. Price, nice to meet you. I was immediately attracted to the friendliness of Robert Williams, owner of Sutton Hydraulics. He was the polar opposite of the bastard I was splitting up with. Thank you for having me, Sir Williams, I said politely. I took a seat in his imposing office, and he sat across from me and started talking. I'm surprised you're leaving engineering. Mr. Price, please call me Alex, and I can't wait to get out of there, I replied. You're doing a great job there. Mr. Price. Alex, sorry. Still. He was looking at me with a confused look on his face. I'm doing a great job. Mr. Williams. Please call me Robert, he chimed in as I said. I've worked hard over the last 10 years, and it's been my developments that have driven the company forward, all without much gratitude, and lately without any respect. He looked at me seriously for a few seconds. I hadn't mentioned anything about my situation, and I was willing to keep it a secret for now. There is no doubt that I want you to be here, Alex. I can offer you the package you asked for, which amounts to a raise of several thousand. But you also said on the phone that if you could help us win a few more contracts, you would like a commission. Is that correct? He frowned. Yes. I hope it's not something illegal. Alex, I'm not going to be involved in that, he said. I raised my hand to assure him of my honorable intentions. I interact a lot with our customers. I interact with them daily. I know what they pay for our products, and I know them practically by heart. I began to explain to an attentive Robert Williams. How would anyone know that we offer more favorable terms, and with my designs and your team, we can be the best in the game? What do you say? I suggest with confidence. He extended his hand and shook it. I looked into his eyes and saw that he was looking at a man of integrity. Another part of the plan had been fulfilled now. I'm back to my cheating wife Holly. We met at Kingston University in South London. She was in her final year of a creative writing degree, and I was completing my master's in mechanical engineering and design. As I said, I was too shy to approach her, and she never lacked attention from men. She was 5 feet 5 inches tall, with brown hair and big brown eyes. She was the kind of woman you could get lost in. She had a beautiful body. But I knew she was out of my league. All the guys running after her were outgoing and popular. To my surprise, one of her friends started talking to me at the party, and Holly came over and joined us. I had little experience with women, and I think my modesty and shyness made me attractive to her. I worked up the courage to ask her out, and we started dating after about 6 months of dating. I heard rumors that she was having sex with other guys, but I wasn't having any way to test it, and I was scared to confront her. Holly was a spoiled brat. Her parents spoiled her and her sister Caroline. And for most of our relationship, I had to put up with her princess-like behavior. If things weren't going well, she would make a mess, and she wasn't ashamed to make a scene in public, which confused me. My friends couldn't stand her and thought I should get rid of her. But I was in love, and I had never experienced anything like it before. When we graduated, we both got jobs and were able to rent an apartment near Southampton in Hampshire. Her family was from there, and I had stopped having anything in common with mine for a long time. We got married a year later, and the following year Sophie was born, followed by Abba a couple of years later. Holly loved being a mother, and everything between us had been great. Since then, I got promoted several times, and 10 years ago, I started working for Walker Engineering. Pay rises and bonuses helped us save up for a better house, but like most people in the world, 2008 was a bad year. The economic recession meant that many people lost their jobs. It became harder to get contracts, so we all had to work harder at work and work longer hours without receiving any extra money. It was during this time when both girls were in high school that I noticed Holly was having an affair with some guy from our old university. I was so focused on work that when it ended, I never realized who it was, and my best friend Toby thought it was a boy from her class who had moved nearby. I mentioned it to her one day, and she just laughed in my face and told me to stop being stupid. But I knew I was lying. Thanks to being able to keep my job and a good salary, I was able to buy a nice house. Holly had always demanded that I buy a house that matched our status, whatever that meant. But as I always gave in, and we managed to buy a nice 5-bedroom detached house in Southampton. It was a buyer's market at the time, so we got a good price. Although the mortgage was a bit high, the only thing I did out of line was open a new savings account in my name. I only deposited my year-end bonus into it, and as I was the sole breadwinner and in charge of all the finances and banking, I don't think Holly would have known about it. Even if I had shown the receipts in her face in retrospect, it turned out to be one of the best things I could have done. I needed protection because I wasn't sure if Holly was planning on leaving me. If the old lover ever came back after that, things went back to normal, and the girls were always my top priority. I encouraged them in their studies and tried to spend lots of time with them at weekends. In fact, I was the one who took them to dance classes, concerts, and the zoo. More times than I can remember. Holly always seemed to be too busy in her coffee dates with her other spoiled and lazy friends. Rarely socialized with other husbands, but we all seemed nepotistic and subservient to some degree or another. My friends would sing me the Rolling Stones song, Under My Sam, when I had to cancel plans in favor of something Holly wanted to do. Even at work, the guys on the factory floor would make comments about my marital status, especially the control Holly had over me. It was only a few months ago that everything fell into place. Abba had just left for college, and for the first time in 18 years, Holly and I were alone. Both girls went to our old alma mater, and as I finished unpacking Abba's things in the apartment, she would share with her sister. She turned to me and asked why she was with her mother. I was stunned, as she had always been such a quiet girl, like her old father Dad. I heard she is hanging out with Henry Ware at your company, said Abba. I still remember the tears in her eyes when she spoke. It was news to me, but it didn't surprise me all these years. I could have investigated her affairs, but I never did for fear of breaking up the family and making my girls suffer for it. And I resented her like my sisters. I resented my father. I let her fool me because the alternative was not worthy of thinking I still loved her. But I loved even more what we had created. This news left several impressions on me. Firstly, I realized for the first time that the level of hostility my daughters felt towards their mother was much greater than I had imagined. They loved and respected me, but I knew they were disappointed that I hadn't taken a harder one towards Jolly. Secondly, it made me remember the old feelings I had for the women in my life growing up, and how that contributed to my weaknesses. And finally, I realized that at work the employees openly talked and laughed at me, and especially at Henry Walker, who turned out to be Jack's nephew, the owner of the company, and the man she had cheated on me with. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't take it anymore. Especially now that my youngest daughter had found out how Holly was teasing me. I knew I had to confront her. My heart was pounding as I sat at the kitchen table waiting for Holly to come home when she finally showed up. I found I couldn't talk anymore. She just looked at me with what I would call apathy and contempt. She didn't say anything as she put her bags away in the cupboards. I finally spoke. "You're having an affair with Henry." She turned to look at me, blushing slightly, but answered without hesitation. "I wouldn't call this an affair, honey." I was shocked by her confession, and waited silently for her to explain why having sex with another man, Bree, didn't count as an affair. "You are a wonderful person, Alex. You are a great provider and my best friend. But there are things you can't provide for me, and I'm not ashamed to say, I want it all," she said bluntly and openly. "So, are you cheating on me?" I said, put off by her blatant approach to infidelity. "Just my body," she said, "not my heart or my mind. That belongs to you." My head was spinning, and my stomach was in knots. The sheer audacity of her words left me speechless. "I have never turned you down for sex, and all I do is explore with a couple of young guys." She admitted what I yelled. I didn't raise my voice once, and my reaction took her by surprise. She walked around the table and took a seat across from me. "Don't yell at me, Alex," she said, regaining her composure. "You admitted to cheating on me with 2 guys, and I'm supposed to stay quiet," I replied. "I do, Alex. But this is how it's going to be. Face it, or I'll still leave and be with them," she said, giving me both a threat and an ultimatum. I just stood there staring at her as her face softened for a moment. I thought I saw the pain in my face. "Everyone does it these days, Alex. My friends have had affairs with younger men, and they say it makes marriage better." She said. I was shocked. I was having a hard time taking it all in before, and now Holly really... She was trying to justify her cheating by telling me that all her friends were also cheating. As to her opinion that it would make our marriage better, she was dismissive at best. She didn't care about marriage or me, just the comfort and security I could provide. I spoke up again. "So I can have another woman? Is that what you're saying, Holly?" She looked at me for a few seconds, then laughed in my face. I stayed silent, while she kept laughing, trying to pull myself together. "Yeah, Alex. Come on, be serious. You have trouble talking to women you've known for years. What chance do you have of talking to another person?" She was blatantly mocking as she kept laughing, and I felt embarrassed and ashamed. But she wouldn't stop. "This is how it's going to be, Alex. So don't ruin a good thing. I'm still your wife. I still love you, and I still come home to you every night. Don't ruin your life. Don't complain about it, and don't do something you'll regret later," she said confidently. She left me on the table thinking about what just happened in my life. In my world, she was talking so openly about her affairs that I could tell she didn't care one bit. I didn't care that all her friends were hanging out with others, but that didn't give her the right to do it. Not only that, but she had the gall to threaten me. I was angry, very angry that night. I slept in the guest room. I couldn't be near her. But around midnight, Holly woke me up and she asked why I wasn't going to bed. She was really so confused. I knew I was a spoiled brat. "But seriously, come on, Alex, get over it. That's how the world works now. You're just acting like an old man," she said. I didn't say anything. I felt her presence on the landing, looking towards the spare room. "Whatever you want, Alex, you'll be back in bed soon. I know you don't. You deny me anything. And as much as you know as I do, that I'll get what I want," she said with confidence. She was actually right. What had I done in my 22-year relationship that indicated anything other than my unbridled devotion and willingness to do whatever she said and wanted? Was common knowledge that I was on the payroll, and now it was common knowledge amongst her friends and my co-workers that I was also a cuckold. I didn't sleep a wink. So I decided to go downstairs and watch the television. There was a show on about celebrities that I guess. So why did she leave? And it was... like my mother said, she had abandoned us before I left for college. I found out from my brother-in-law that my father had died years ago, but my sisters denied knowing it. That's when I decided to cut them out of my life the next day. I got up and left the house before Holly even showed up in our room. The thoughts of what she had told me were still in my head, and I was desperately trying to focus on something more positive to get through the day. I remembered the television show from the night before, and decided to do some inquiries about my father. The girls didn't need me as much anymore, and my wife was having sex with who knows who. So maybe answering questions about who and what my father was would keep me busy. "Good morning, Alex." I turned to see who was talking, and I was met with Henry Walker. The smug look on his face, as if he was about to burst into laughter at any moment, made my blood boil. I just looked at him and said nothing. "How's your wife?" he asked openly, mocking me. I heard some snickers from the men adults next to the coffee machine. If I simply stared at them as they held their ground, I walked past them as they continued to laugh at my expense. I felt as if everyone knew my business, and even my boss's secretary Olivia seemed to find my situation laughable and open to ridicule. "Can I offer you something? Mr. Price, perhaps a couple of balls?" I looked up at her. "What did you just say?" I asked. Looking her in the eyes, she shifted from foot to foot and walked over to me. "I told you there were no calls," she said. trying to hold back a laugh. I walked into my office and sat down at my desk. My day had started in the worst possible way, and now it was the make me laugh both at work and at home. I tried my best to focus on my project, but the anger inside me would not subside. I decided to start looking for my father. All I knew was that he was born in Cambridgeshire and had left us at the age of 38 in 1977. So I started looking into family history websites in the area after a 30-minute search. I found there were 14 people in Canberra named James Price, born in 1939. I knew he could have died a few years before I went to college, so I was able to narrow it down to 3 possible people. I decided I didn't have time to look up every single one of them, so I posted on genealogy websites in each of the towns I found. While I was sitting in my office reflecting on the last 24 hours, I got a call from my boss, Jack. He wanted to talk to me in his office. Jack was a successful, wealthy man, but in his 60s, he had been married 3 times. He was a cheater and an abuser. One of those power-obsessed guys who demanded respect, but gave nothing in return. Many times in the past, I had considered leaving, but he always convinced me to stay. And yes, the money was the best. The only thing I knew about him was that he was having sex with his secretary Olivia behind his 3rd wife's back. "I've heard that your wife is playing a trick on you," Alex said brusquely, "with your nephew." I replied dryly, "Well, yes, he is a temperamental guy. It runs in the family," he said, laughing when I stopped talking, "but that's what I want to talk to you about. I don't want this to affect the business, and family comes first for me, Alex. So if you get into trouble, it will be you who has to leave the company, understood?" He spoke to me like an old school teacher punishing a child. I bit my lip as his impatient secretary Olivia approached the door. No doubt she was gathering information to pass on to her friends at the factory. As I turned to leave, I wondered why a young woman like her would lower herself to having sex with a dirty old man like Jack Walker. As I passed by her, I heard the giggles again. I lowered my head and left as the door closed behind me. I heard explosive laughter that was clearly directed at me. As I returned to my office, I realized that there wasn't doing me any good. I had paid for my daughter's education, and now all I was doing was funding my wife's infidelities. I was a pretty simple person. I liked my gadgets, but I could live without a big house. Most of my living expenses were indulgences, from Holly weekly visits to the hairdresser and manicure, her car and phone, and other unnecessary luxuries. I was usually happy at work. It was my place to be creative, and I was very successful. I was the one who designed many of the pieces that were made and sold here. And I was sure I could find work elsewhere. They just thought I was too weak. And they were right. I wasn't the confrontational type. And I never caused trouble because I was content. I was the good old Al, a humble engineer that people could count on. I looked at the home screen with a picture of the family on vacation. I clicked my mouse, and my email page opened. Waiting for me was a message from a woman named Jennifer Holmes from the committee Cambridge Genealogical. I was stunned by how quickly they responded. I clicked the button and read the message. I was shocked Jennifer read my post asking for information on my father, and contacted a woman who claimed to be her niece, and who had been on the same site many months earlier, researching her family tree. Her name was Rachel Murray, and she was my cousin. I sent Jennifer my number and asked if Rachel could contact me. I left work feeling comforted as soon as I walked through the door. I could smell dinner cooking. I dropped my bag in the hallway and walked into the kitchen to find Holly busy cooking. We managed to mumble a hello, but ate in silence throughout dinner. Holly kept trying to make eye contact with me, but apparently she could tell I was still angry until this evening. I hadn't been able to last a few hours without giving in or let her get away with it. She broke the ice. "Can we talk about last night?" Alex asked shyly. "What is there to talk about? You explained everything perfectly last night. Will I accept it or not, right?" For a few seconds, she looked at me with a regretful expression on her face, but it didn't last long. She took a deep breath, cleared her throat, and continued. "You are a great husband, and you have never denied me anything. So please don't reject me." "Alex," she was almost begging, like she always does, to get what she wants. "If I'm so good, why are you cheating on me? Why are you making me look like a fool?" I asked sincerely. She stopped and just ignored me. I had no answer. She was just being selfish, and I was getting more and more tired of it. I couldn't do anything to make her happy, No matter how many hours I work to pay the bills and give her everything she wants, all I got was disrespect and teasing. I drive a 12-year-old Range Rover and she drives a car that's less 2 years. Listen, Alex, I have needs and you just can't meet them. So either you can handle it like I know you can, or let me go with a younger man. You mean Henry Walker? You could have used his name Holly. Everyone knows you had sex with him. I interrupted. Yes. Henry and I are lovers. He's practically your boss. Alex, and one day he's going to take over his company. Uncle, he said bluntly. So he's giving me what I need in bed right now, and if you don't give in, and you agree, I'll leave you, and he'll give me everything else I want and need. I didn't say anything as usual. I just got up from my seat and walked into the office. I suddenly wanted to hit someone or something. But instead I sank into my chair and screamed into my hands. Tears came to my eyes, and I wanted to be anywhere but here and now. I found a tissue and wiped my eyes when the phone rang. I picked it up and heard an unfamiliar voice on the other end. It was Rachel. We talked for about an hour, and when I hung everything up, everything else was forgotten, and a huge smile appeared on my face. Rachel was delighted that I had decided to get involved with my father, and she had a lot to tell me. She talked at 100 miles an hour, and I had a hard time absorbing everything she said. I learned that my mom had kicked my dad out of the house and lied to me all my childhood. Sadly, she died in 1983 when I was just 11. She died of alcohol poisoning, and her mother, my grandmother, always blamed my mom for her temper and mental state after she left us. Rachel told me that she really wanted to get back into my life, but was prevented from doing so. We agreed to meet this weekend at her house in Cambridge. I was excited and knew the break would do me good. The rest of the week went by slowly. Everything was the same at home. But at work they constantly laughed behind my back. Henry and his friends thought it would be funny to hang a pair of panties on my office door. I looked at Olivia, but she didn't say anything inside the panties. There was a note saying, "Please go back to your wife." I was broken that day too. I sat at my desk and cried. I wanted to blame everyone but myself. I was glad when Saturday came. I told Holly I was going to visit a friend in London, and she didn't care what I was doing. I assumed she would make fun of me, so her absence made it easier for her. The journey to Cambridge was stressful. The M25 motorway turned out to be a nightmare as usual, and I ended up finding Rachel's house an hour later than expected. This didn't seem to affect her, as I was greeted with the best hug I've ever had, and I was introduced to her husband Greg and their 2 young sons, GR and William. Once the formalities were over, we moved on to talk about my father and my new family. Rachel had a warm and selfless personality. She and Greg would go back and forth and finish each other's sentences. I think they were both eager to share our family history during my stay. There, I was joined by David and Louise Price. He was my cousin and Rachel's brother. We got on really well, and he added everything he knew about my father and family. After lunch, we went for a walk where I had time to reflect when we got back. David and I talked about work and family life. I could see that things were not going well, and for some reason, I trusted both of my new cousins. I was so grateful to them. I left Cambridge with a new perspective on things I had been told so many lies and treated so badly throughout my life, that realizing I had a completely different family who showed me more kindness and honesty in a single day than most people I had ever met in my entire life gave me the hope I needed to get my life together and find happiness not only for myself, but for my daughters, my friends, and my new family. By the time I arrived home, it was 8 p.m., and Holly was about to go out. "Where are you going, Holly?" I asked. "Going out with friends," she replied. "You mean Henry or Max?" I replied gruffly. She seemed somewhat surprised that I knew the name of her other lover. I gave her a sympathetic look. "Please don't do this again," Alex begged, seemingly indifferent to my feelings. "Please, Holly, I ask you to stop doing this and become my wife." "Stop being stupid," I pleaded. "I am your wife, Alex, and I always will be. Don't deny me my pleasures, and I will make your life easier." "I will be back before midnight," she said completely, ignoring my wishes and continuing to threaten me. She approached me with her arms open, but I turned my back. She said nothing to my obvious insult. She simply grabbed her Prada bag and headed for the door. "As your husband, Holly, I ask you not to do this." My voice became harsher. She stopped where she was and looked at me like wondering who this guy was, and what he thought of talking to him like that. It only lasted a second before bursting into laughter. "What are you going to do, Alex? Leave me. You will never have the courage to do it. We both know you will always be by my side," he said. He was mortified. I hung my head as his words echoed in my head for me. "You have no balls, you deny me my pleasures forever." I knew I was spoiled. Her parents made sure of that. I knew I treated her like a queen while I was the workhorse. I knew I was selfish, but I always believed she loved me more than anything. I knew I was a fool, and I knew I had been for too long. This had to end, and I needed to make plans for it to happen. I wasted no time and got down to business. I really started when Henry or Max was having sex with her. Maybe they were doing it together. Maybe that's what she meant when she said she liked to receive brown and eat them. I provided her security protection and material goods, while two young men slept with her as she pleased. These thoughts were driving me crazy, and I was starting to lose my focus. I needed to find a way to destroy the last vestiges of my attachment to her. And I think I found it. I found the box I was looking for, and the particular picture inside it was the only picture of my mom and my sisters. I didn't think it would work, but I cut Holly's face out of the picture and taped it next to them. I had no love left for them, and adding Holly's mocking face to the picture might help. I put it on the desk next to the monitor in my office. It was about 12:45, and I was finishing up work. I had pretty much decided what I was going to do in the near future. I had an idea of when I would leave, but it might be in a few weeks. I had time because Holly didn't expect me to leave. It might not work out, and I would definitely need help to carry it all out. But by now I had convinced myself that I would see it through. I heard someone walk out the door, and as I got up to look out the window, I saw Henry Walker's car drive away. I heard her walk up the stairs, and I quickly deleted my story. I would have to use incognito mode in the future. I waited for her to enter our room, and I went down the stairs to make myself a coffee. I sat on the couch and thought about my future away from this place. Honestly, without my daughter's presence, I knew it wouldn't be that bad. I decided to try to move closer to them on Monday morning. I came to work clearly realizing that I wouldn't lift another finger. Anyone didn't care if I said goodbye. I walked to my office. Ignoring the insults and comments directed at me, I would destroy those bastards, and I knew my anger would get me through this. I managed to get an appointment with the bank for 1 p.m., and I took advantage of the time to prepare myself by analyzing my finances. The chances were slim, but if everything worked out okay, and the right people helped me, I would get out of this situation. And so the meeting went as planned, and I was able to close my savings account and take my name off our joint account. I still had an ISA with a few thousand in it, so I closed it to get cash on the way to the office. I stopped by the PC World store and bought 2 digital voice recorders, a 500GB USB 3.0 hard drive, and a new hard drive for my PC back in the office. I sat down at my desk and started to see if I could open the company's clients' personal files. I had seen a glimpse of them in Jack's office. So I knew they existed, but I needed his password. It didn't take me more than an hour to crack it, ironically. His wife's name was his username, and the password was his name, and his 6-digit birthday number. Jack 24656. I had everything I needed the disk to my computer, and uploaded all the files. In it 10 minutes later, I did the same with all my new plans and drawings for the system. Energy-efficient hydraulic pump I was working on to keep this company ahead of the curve. We were creating pumps for air conditioners, heavy equipment, and even the dairy sector. I deleted all my computer history, including all my plans and designs. Then I took out the hard drive and replaced it. New, put everything in my bag, and reinstalled from the day, researching our competitors on my phone, logged onto the Monster website to search for engineering jobs in the Surrey area south of London, and then left for the day that night. After another silent dinner, I went to my office. I found out one of our principals, who was going through a financial downturn, was looking for a mechanical engineer to help design and run the shop. Not exactly what I wanted, but close enough. They were offering a salary £10,000 less than my current salary. So I sent an email and attached my CV. That night, I decided to sleep in our marital bed, just so I wouldn't upset Holly. However, let's make sure she came in. I felt her rubbing up against me and I felt sick to my stomach. But as sick as I was, it felt good to react like that. She was upset with me, and that would help me in the long run. The next day, I got a call from a very surprised Robert Williams from Sutton Hydraulics. We spoke briefly, and I couldn't believe I would consider leaving Walker Engineering for a small company. He offered me the job almost straight away, but I insisted on an interview the next day. She agreed. Another important screw was put in place, and the wheels started turning very quickly. I had plenty of free time, so I started looking for apartments in the area. I didn't need a house, and although there weren't many options, I managed to find a very nice apartment to rent. It was £100 a month with 2 bedrooms, and it was perfect for me. The apartment was 15 minutes from the girls and 5 minutes from work. I arranged a viewing for the day after my interview with Robert Williams finished. I then spoke to Jack and told him I needed to meet my daughters in Kingston the next day to sign some papers. But he just ignored me and said, "Go that night." I called my best friend Toby Brown. We knew each other since 6th grade. We both had gone to Kingston, but he had studied finance and maths. Now he was a top banking analyst in the city and lived with his wife and kids in a nice house in Twickenham mostly. He and his wife hated Jolly, so we rarely spoke to each other as a couple. Holly was jealous of Sarah because she was an ambitious egg developer and married to a rich banker. I guess even with all I was giving her, she still wasn't on her level. We agreed to meet Toby the next day after the interview and the visit to the apartment. He knew I had something in mind, but I told him I would tell him everything. When we met on the road, I thought about a lot of things. Today was important not only for my short-term plan, but also for my future. At this point, I had no idea how the girls would react until the recent revelations. I had planned to retire at 55. I was thinking of investing in a villa in Italy or somewhere else. My mortgage would be paid off when I turned 50, and the additional 5 years of work would allow us to build up a small fund without relying on a retirement wallet. My new job was about 20 minutes from the girls' apartment. The meeting was quick. The apartment was perfect, so I had plenty of time before I met up with Toby. I bought lunch for myself and the girls and headed to their apartment. They lived together, and I paid half the rent as I approached the house. I didn't know what I would say to them. I didn't know how often they talked to their mom, but I knew I didn't want to hide anything from them when they saw me. They ran up to me and grabbed me as I was already walking through the door. My smile could be seen from space. "I miss them so much, Dad." "Dad," they screamed, laughing as if they were still little. They took me inside the house and prepared the lunch I had brought on. The way we sat and ate while they told me about their lives and their studies. I was very proud of my 2 girls. Sophie had already studied pharmacology for 2 years, and Ava was studying nursing. 2 professions for loving and caring people. I saw Rachel in them, and I talked at length about our new family, promising that soon we would all meet. When we finished lunch, I took a sip of coffee, and they knew something was up. "What's up, Dad? Tell," she said. "Sophie." "Well, you know your mom cheated on me, right?" I said to both. They looked at each other. Then they turned their gaze towards me and nodded in unison. "Well, I've had enough, and I've decided I'm going to leave her. You gossip about everyone. It's okay." "Ah," she said. "Abba, it's about time, Dad." Sophie watered. "They're not mad or anything, girls?" I asked shyly. "No, Dad, for as long as I can remember. She's been a pain to you." Sophie growled. I thought about scolding her for disrespecting her mother, but I didn't. In fact, I thought it was good for Sophie. I also felt ashamed again because they had obviously seen this growing up. I hoped they wouldn't follow in their mother's footsteps when it came to men. I hoped I hadn't hurt them, no way, because I was too weak and pathetic. I also hoped to respect. "What are you going to do?" Dad asked Abba. I told them I had a new job, and that I was moving closer to them. They were excited but also surprised that Raimi had decided to get away from her cheating mother and had already made plans to do so. I got 2 big hugs, and lovingly I told them I would do everything I could to protect my financial future without going into too much details when I got up to leave. They said they would support me no matter what. And although they loved their mother, she came second to me and always had. I left their apartment full of happiness, and now I was ready for the next phase of my plan. This was the most important part. Toby and Sarah met a few years after he left college. They are two of the nicest people I know. And tonight I would be counting on their favor. They welcomed me warmly as usual, but my mind was spinning, thinking about what I would ask them. And they both knew I was out of my league. They wanted to know right away what was going on. And I told them I hadn't felt about going around the subject. I explained everything that had happened, and the first part of my plans they were more surprised by my resistance than by Holly's infidelity for them. It was quite common. So why did you leave her now? Alex. Sarah asked, passing me another cup of tea. I declined something stronger as I had to drive home today. I always thought she was cheating on me, but I couldn't try it now. He admitted it, and everything fell into place. I also discovered something that made me say, enough is enough. I told them about meeting my cousins, and that my mom kicked my dad out of the house, and that my sister took his side. My father was just like me. Or rather, I was just like him. But this time, my girls are on my side. So it was this discovery that finally led me to stand up for myself. I explained what was it, they said in unison. It had a rose on it, and underneath was the inscription in his memory. There was the date of his birth, and underneath that, the age he died. I said there was a moment of silence before he spoke again. He died at 44, the age I am now. Toby and Sarah recoiled slightly at this news, and I realized that they understood. There were times when I could reach for a shot glass like he did, or drive myself to suicide. Like my grandmother thought he was doing, I had a choice to be like him or fight. I decided that I wasn't going to kill myself anymore, trying to be the perfect husband whilst being bullied and ridiculed. At that moment, I felt weaker than I had been in weeks. Admitting to my friends how depressed I was harder than I had realized. I said, "What do you want from us? Alex, please turn me down and lower that price." Sarah chimed in. I smiled and nodded. Sarah seemed to have a hard side to her character. When I thought I was having an affair in 2008, I opened a separate savings account and put all my bonuses and all the extra money into it. I was also lucky that the only way I could get a home loan for the amount we needed was to apply for it in my name alone. Holly didn't have a real employment history, so it was easier for me to apply alone. I knew if anyone was able to follow my train of thought, it was Toby. My savings with interest are now worth $60,800. Lee, I have £122,000 left mortgage, but the house on the next street to mine sold for over $500,000. Toby, I need you and your contacts to get me a short-term loan for the remaining £60,000. I want to pay off the mortgage before I divorce her when I divorce her. Why bother means she can have half, said Sarah. Well, unless you count the £60,000 in savings I'm keeping anyway, you can fight over half of it all anyway, but that's where you guys come in. I said, pausing for a second. I want you to incorporate a new company. What do you mean? Register a new company. Toby interjected. I want to transfer ownership of my house to your new company. That means she won't be able to get her hands on it. I've looked into that. And if I pay off the mortgage, all I have to do is go to the land registry and transfer the papers to your company. I explained. Toby and Sarah looked at each other for a moment. Will that work? Alex, I mean, if you divorce her, we'll hire a lawyer and fight for you. Everything said Toby doesn't have the money for that, and I'm sure her parents won't want to pay such a big bill if they know their daughter is a cheater. Plus, I hope to use her opinion of me to my advantage. I said how she asked Toby. She thinks I'm a coward who will never leave her. So I'm not filing for divorce until I sell the house. The property turns into cash, and by the time she realizes I'm divorcing her, we can move that money to many different accounts. I explained. Toby. He just smiled at me and said, I never knew you had that in you, Alex. So are you going to help me? I asked. Or, yes. I'll get to work on it right away. But you know a good lawyer will try to track down the money, right? He said yes, but it will take a long time, and he won't be able to pay a huge legal bill, I said. After another hour of talking at home, all the pieces were in place. On the way home, I decided I wasn't even going to file for divorce. I was sure I wouldn't meet anyone else, let alone I would get married again. And that way, I would have more time to think about it. I laughed to myself. By next week, I would be gone when I got home. It was almost 2 a.m. I looked at Jolly, and she was fast asleep. No regrets keeping her awake. I thought I decided to go to the guest room on Thursday morning. I got up and left the house before Holly woke up. I even wrote my resignation letter in the morning, and around noon, I called Toby. I have good news. Bad news. And then good news again, friend. Okay, let's go in that order, I said, laughing. The good news is, I have registered the company. It's only been an hour in the company house. He said the bad news is that to get a loan for the amount you need, you will need a serious guarantor, something like a house, and that won't work for you, he continued. I was frustrated and scratching my head, trying to think of something when Toby continued, listen, Alex, you trust me, and I trust you. I've been talking to Sarah about this, and we've been thinking the same thing. Transfer £60,000 into your account right now, so you can get on with it. Just give me the money back when you find it. Okay. I was stunned. If he could see my face now, he'd realize how grateful I am. This is too much. Toby, you've done enough, I interrupted. Just take the money and go do what you need to do, he said. You have no idea how much this helps me, mate. I owe you a huge debt of gratitude. Just do it. Stay away from this cheating, disrespectful freeloader and be happy. That's all we care about. I gave him my details and ended the call. My next call was to the bank for a meeting the next day after work. Or lack thereof, I drove to the local Land Rover dealer. I met the guy because that's where I bought Holly's Range Rover Sport about 10 months ago. In fact, I was still paying it off. I had an idea how to get some more money. Hi, Sir Price. You have finally decided on a new car. Jan Reeves met me at the entrance. He was the owner of the dealership. No script, he wanted to discuss selling my wife's car and paying off my debts. I said, looking happier than I should have been. I hope all is well. He asked. Is it okay? You met her. And you know how demanding she is now. She wants a Mercedes 4x4. I said I don't mean anything bad, but she was upset. He admitted we came to an agreement that he would take the Range Rover back and they would cancel the payment. I promised to come back to upgrade my car. And he knew he could make up for the value of Holly's car by selling it as practically new. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but the thought of him selling me an expensive new Range Rover made up for it. You think on the way home, I picked up a 2016 brochure, but not for myself. But for Jolly. When I got home, Holly was sitting in the living room drinking coffee, looking a little pale. I took off my jacket and I threw my purse on the floor. Everything okay, love? I asked through my teeth. Yes. I just feel a little tired, sweetie, she said, taking a sip from her cup. She held out her arms as if she wanted me to hug her and make her feel better. I ignored her. I went back to my purse and pulled out a brochure. I know what will make you feel better, I said. I walked over to her and sat down on the coffee table in front of her. She looked confused at the empty seat next to her and then at me. What do you have there? She asked, looking at the brochure. Your car? It's almost a year old, and I was at the dealership today and saw their new model. It's amazing, I said as her eyes lit up. I want my wife the best. So I'm going to trade in your car and buy you this one, I said, pointing at the new 2017 model on the brochure. Oh, how I love that, she said, ignoring my plan. You always know how to make me feel better, don't you, Alex? The only problem is they already have a buyer for your car, so I need to get it there by Friday afternoon. I'm done. I'll plow the job early and take it to the dealership, and you can use mine this weekend to visit your loved ones, I said. The last comment made her back off, and a look of sook and confusion came over her face. What's wrong? I asked. Nothing, Alex. I just thought you were still upset about our agreement, she said. It wasn't our agreement. Holly was yours. I had no say in it. But I guess I repressed. I have no choice. Do I say, waiting for an answer? She just nodded, like she had finally put me in my place and admitted defeat. I love you, Alex. I turned around to look at her, and was met with a sincere look of concern. I said nothing in response, and just walked away towards the kitchen. The phone rang, and I went out into the garden to answer. Toby confirmed the money had been transferred. I was ready to go the next day. Without wasting any time, I walked into the bank and found myself in the office of a mortgage loan officer. He looked to be my age, but he wasn't wearing a wedding ring. I wondered if there could be a life after Holly. But I pushed the thought out of my mind an hour later. The mortgage was paid, all my remaining bills were closed on, and I went through several houses and opened a new account at another bank. I was happy knowing I wouldn't have to pay anything else unless Holly hired a lawyer and went to court. My smile faded. I walked back to the office, ignoring Olivia as she got up to talk. I sat down with a cup of coffee and contemplated the next stage of my plan. I contacted the land registry and filled out the appropriate online application form. It had all the details of Toby and Sarah's new company, and within 10 minutes of submitting the application, I received a confirmation email stating it would take 3 to 5 days to process. After that, I would simply hand the documents over to Toby, and he could register the property to his company. I decided to browse the internet for furniture and details to cancel the utilities on the house. I had to wait for the right time, but I did open new accounts for my apartment in Sutton. Finally, I had one more thing left to do. Something I had been putting off. I knocked on the next door. Olivia was there with him. Of course, that old pervert. He usually fooled around with her on Fridays, and it seemed like I was interrupting their affair. She left us alone. "What can I do to help you, Alex?" she said cheerfully, ushering Olivia out of the room with a glare. I put my resignation letter on her desk. She looked at me with a goofy grin on her face. "What is it?" she asked. "I have resigned," I replied. "I think it would be best if I left immediately given the situation with our families. I doubt you want me to be here for long." He looked stunned. "I would appreciate it if you had my P45 document ready for Monday. And please don't tell anyone about it." "My wife doesn't know," I said defiantly. "But you can't do that. We need you," she said pathetically. "Not as much as you need your nephew. I will be here Monday to pick up the last things about him." I pretended to drop a pen from my pocket, and bending down pulled a voice recorder out of my sock. I managed to grab a pin, and standing up, I pressed the record button, and I slid it in and into the wooden frame. "If that's all Jack needs, I have things to do." I said, "Okay, Alex. But don't come crawling when you run out of money. Your money is the only thing keeping that cheating wife with you. Do you realize, of course I know, Jack. I wish my wife was as faithful as yours." I said, smiling. I knew that hurt him. I turned around and walked out of his office an hour later. I drove home and picked up the car and Holly's magazine. I drove to the dealership and dropped off his car. Luckily, Keanu Reeves offered to drive me home, and I gladly accepted when I got home that afternoon. Jolly was sitting at the kitchen table with big red bags under her eyes. I knew I had been crying. "What's going on, Jai?" I asked with false sincerity. "We need to talk," Alex said, gesturing for me to sit down for a moment. I felt like I was being given away. A feeling of terror came over me. "What's going on?" I asked. "I was at the doctor's office today, and they diagnosed me." She hesitated. There were so many thoughts going around in my head. If this was serious, what kind of man would I have to be to leave a seriously ill woman? How was I about to do it? I have to Tamdio, just tell me. "Holly, what is it?" I begged her to say. "I have Gary, finally," she said, bursting into tears. Laughed. Damn, I laughed. And she just looked at me. "No. It's not funny. I'm so embarrassed," she said. I turned to her, and she looked confused. This was supposed to be humiliating. "Well, I know I don't have it because I haven't touched you in over a month, and when I found out about your escapades, I used protection," I said, trying not to gag dear too much. "Oh, so everything is fine with you. So far, is that normal?" She stayed silent. "Just take your medicine, and soon you will be back on your feet." "Oops. I mean, on your feet," I said. "If looks could kill, I would be dead already. Just find out which one of them gave it to you and tell them to take it to the doctors before the disease spreads any further," I said, getting up and leaving her crying on the table that night. I slept well for the first time in months. Of course, I slept on the guest invitation. I shouldn't have taken any chances with an exhausted wife on Saturday in the morning. I was feeling great. A good night's sleep definitely helped. So I went to our room and woke Jolly up in bed to tell her I was going to give her time to rest and recover. "I'm going to see the girls. I'll give them all your wishes. Rest." "Okay," I said, with all the love I could go. She smiled at me and asked me to hold her. I gave in. But I did half as she let go. Her grip must have sensed that something was wrong with me. She looked at me sadly and said, "You think I'm disgusting, don't you?" I didn't say anything, and suddenly tears started running down her cheeks. "I just want you to feel better." That's all I said. "Oh, Alex, I love you so much. I think I screwed up big." I told Allison about my problem, and she was horrified. At first I felt sorry for her, but it disappeared even faster than I thought. I was a little shocked. Then I realized I had lost all love for the woman I was married to for 21 years. I could hardly have disappeared so quickly, obviously. Yes, because I was prepared for it, and her situation couldn't stop me without saying anything. I left the room, got in the car, and drove away happily later in the morning. I was sitting with the girls, and I told them everything what had happened. They were amazed, and I could see they had a new respect for me. I told them about Holly's little trip to the doctor, which they found hilarious. I shouldn't have laughed, but I couldn't help it, and he suggested that maybe the girls really hated her as much as I did. "What is Dad going to do about it?" He asked. Will he have to go live with his grandparents, or convince one of his lovers to take her in? I have a feeling those two degenerates were only interested in having sex with a married woman and bragging about it. I doubt they want to have a relationship with her. "What do you think?" I asked. They both looked at me and shook their heads that night. I stayed with Toby and Sarah, who were hosting a dinner party, attended by many of their friends and co-workers. Among the guests were several single women my age, and I felt safe enough to strike up a conversation with them. The alcohol helped me get closer to a woman named Amy, who caught my attention. She was a friend of Sarah, and as the drinks flowed, she even managed to convince me to dance. It was a fun night. And it was what I really needed, one night where I wasn't thinking about Holly, the end of my marriage, or my plans to leave her. Like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. When I came home late Sunday morning, I found Holly doing chores around the house. I walked into the living room, and when she saw me, she ran up to me and hugged me. I just patted her on the back. "Where did you stay last night, Alex? I thought you were coming home." She asked. Toby and Sarah had dinner, and I drank too much, so I slept on her couch. I replied nonchalantly, "That's not like you. Did you have fun?" she asked, giving me a wary look. I had to be careful not to reveal anything, so I pulled out my phone and showed her some pictures. Her face soon turned red. "Who is that woman?" she asked angrily. "Oh, she's me. She's a friend of Sarah's. She made me dance. It was so much fun." I explained. I looked up from my phone and saw Holly glaring at me. The irony of her being angry with me. It didn't settle in my mind. She was mad at me for dancing innocently while she was having it with some guy. "Every week I want to go with you next time. I haven't seen the guys for a while," she said. Turning back to her normal color, I headed into the kitchen and put the kettle on. Holly followed me. "Did you feel okay without the car?" I tried to fill the quiet air with small talk. "Am I okay? When does my new car arrive?" she asked. I said they would deliver it on Wednesday. I replied. I turned around and saw. She looked a bit worried, but if you want to pick it up, you can come on Monday afternoon and pick it up. I have things to do on Monday, like get my hair done and go shopping with my sister. She replied, obviously not too worried about the missing car. "I can drop you off in town to meet your sister, and then she can take you to the dealership, and then you can come back in your new Range Rover," I suggested. With an excited smile. She smiled and walked over to me with her arms open. I turned back to the teapot, pretending not to notice her the rest of the day. Holly stood by me, and I felt uncomfortable. She kept trying to kiss me or hug me, and I kept making excuses to leave. I think she noticed what was going on, because when I went to bed, I saw I was crying again. "Good night, Holly. Will you sleep with me tonight?" "Alex, I want to cuddle with you, and for you to tell me everything's going to be okay," she asked. "I didn't feel anything, at least until you get permission from Dr. Holly. I'm sorry, but you yourself. You finished your own grave," I said stiffly. "Well, when I recover, I'm sure I can find a man who wants to go to bed with me. I still have a lot of wasted time to make up for," she replied bitterly. I laughed to myself. It took longer than I expected, but here she was, the crying woman. All the regrets of Friday night had disappeared. For the past 21 years, I would have fallen for her tears. But this time, I ignored her tears and headed to the guest room last night in my house, and she would be in the guest room. I was also glad she said those words. It removed any sign of doubt I may have had. I looked at my picture of her and my sisters, and all I felt was hate towards her. She was kind. When I wanted something, and a witch, when I couldn't get it. Monday morning, I woke up early. Holly woke up early too. She had an appointment with her hairdresser at 8:30, so I took her into town, as I was ad. Don't forget to take a cab to the dealership around 2 p.m. They are waiting for you, I said, ignoring her attempts to kiss me. I left knowing this might be the last time I would see her. Somehow, I was scared it wouldn't happen, but I would do everything I could to make it. So, on the way I called the cell phone company and canceled both contracts. I pulled over to the side of the road to pay the fine with my card. They informed that the phones would continue to work until 5 p.m. Great. Then I went to the office to pick up my P45. I walked into the factory, and there was a solemn atmosphere. The news of my departure must have reached everyone, and for a brief moment, I saw a look of fear on their faces. I didn't know why. Walking down the hall to my office, I passed the coffee machine where they had an idol. The usual suspects. I wasn't sure if Max and Henry knew they both had sex with my wife or not, but they were both smiling as they looked at me and joked with each other. "Good morning, guys," I said cheerfully. "Good morning, Alex. How's the wife?" They said between usual laughs like, "That joke is still funny today. It's beyond me, not so fine." "I'm afraid," I replied, "one of you losers took her away." I walked away in complete silence, and as I turned around, their jaws dropped, and Max yelled something to Henry. I heard a loud noise before I went up the stairs. Olivia saw me coming and smiled slightly, lowering her head. Maybe now I was getting some respect, as I was at the door before he could knock. "I have what you need, so take it and leave." Maybe this respect story was a figment of my imagination. I walked into his office and sat down. I discreetly slipped the recorder into my pocket. I knew he had told his weekly Friday night story to Olivia, and now I had it all recorded. "So you have another job." Alex growled at first. I paid him no attention, but then I decided to give him what he wanted. No, nothing. I said a wide grin appeared on his face, and he probably thought I would come back crawling soon, so I get my last month's salary and my end-of-year bonus. I asked. He burst out laughing as Olivia walked in with my P45. "What's so funny?" she asked. "I just asked for my bonus and my salary," she said. "Alex, it's so funny," she said, Olivia joining in her laughter. I thought, why not? And joined in too. It made them stop and look at me like I was crazy. "Why are you're laughing," Alex said. "Olivia." "I don't know Olivia. Why do you let that old bastard have sex with you?" "Every week," I said, laughing harder and harder. They froze as their eyes got bigger and Jack started to turn red in anger. "I'm sure Mom and Dad are proud of their little girl," I added. She threw my papers on the floor and ran out of the room crying, "You're a bastard." Jack said, "Get out of my office and my company before I make the boys drag you out by your ears." I laughed. I left the house and headed to my office to pack the last of my things. I kept laughing. I stopped when I parked in front of my house. I got out of the car and put the back seats down. I opened the trunk and went into the house. I walked around the house thinking about what I wanted to take. I had several works by Romero Biard, so I took them down and wrapped them in plastic that I found at the garage. I put them in the car and continued going around the house, packing up the final mind. I went upstairs and emptied my wardrobe. I took all my papers out of the safe, including the girls' birth certificates and marriage license. I found an attic ladder. I went up and found all my old stuff. My diploma and family photos were in there. I went into the wardrobe and took out all the jewelry Holly had given me over the years. It must have cost over 10,000 pounds. Then I took all the handbags, shoes, and expensive coats she had brought too. In fact, the whole bloody wardrobe I had bought myself. So I took everything. I've always been a responsible person. So I had receipts for almost everything for insurance, and that would serve me well. When the time came to sell everything, when I finished packing, I realized I would need a TV. So I took that too, along with my movie collection and Blu-ray player. By this time, My car was too full. I figured I would lose all of Holly's clothes, and a few other things that I didn't really need, including some of my old clothes. The new me would require a new wardrobe, and the girls wouldn't pass up the chance to help me with that. I found all the best pictures of me and the girls and put them in the car. I wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere because Holly wasn't due back until after 2 p.m. I grabbed a cup of tea and took 5 minutes for myself. You have to have a cup of tea. I think it's in the Magna Carta. You mumbled satellite, the phone, and internet. I called British, Gas and Southern Water to cancel the utilities. It would take a few days, but I didn't care. I went back to the bedroom and sat on the bed. It was then I noticed something that made me think, something that even scared me. It was on top of the wardrobe in a dusty box. It was Holly's wedding dress. She loved it probably more than me. I took it off and then found our wedding album amongst the box of pictures on the bed, clutching the duvet cover. I gathered all my stuff and went out into the garden. Once outside, I walked to the center of the garden and piled everything into a pile. I added all of Holly's clothes and her stuff that I knew I couldn't sell, of music. Let's make sure later that night, along with the night shift. That way I could go back to work tomorrow morning. He was excited, and I told him I was already working on plans to get new clients and improve the hydraulic pumps that would make it super competitive in the market. I think he sensed my excitement, and as we finished the conversation, I hoped I had brightened his day. It was already 2 p.m., and I was sitting there waiting for the call. I found some solvent in the garage. I went out into the garden and poured it on my wedding dress. I was about to light the fire when the phone rang. "Hi," I said calmly. "What's going on?" "Alex," Holly shouted into the phone. "What do you mean, Holly?" I asked sarcastically. "Don't play dumb," Alex continued. She calmed down. "Holly, what's going on?" There was silence, and I heard her labored breathing. I heard her sister's voice in the background. "They told me you didn't bring me a new car, you sold me mine." "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that," I said. "What are you talking about, Alex? What's going on?" She started to panic. "Okay, from now on, if you need a car, you can pay for it yourself," I said, trying to stay calm as best I could. My heart was beating frantically. "I don't understand, Alex," she said, weak and confused. "You heard me perfectly. Okay, Holly, if you want it, now you can buy it. If you excuse me, I need to clean the kitchen." What is this? Some kind of macabre joke? I didn't say anything. "We'll talk about this when I get home, Alex. I'm not satisfied with being my madam," she screamed. I was silent again. I heard her panting, as if she was pacing back and forth towards her sister's car. The slamming of the door confirmed that she was. I knew that she was on her way in this condition. Could she convince her sister to be here in 5 minutes? "Alex Alal." "Yes," I answered. "Almost too much. Calm, you said you were in our kitchen," she asked, suddenly realizing what she had said. "Yes. Why aren't you at work?" she asked. I didn't say anything. "Alex Alal." Her breathing hitched, and I could hear the panic and confusion in her voice. I hung up the phone as she kept calling my name. I went outside. I lit a match and set it on fire. Our past ignited as I walked away. I pulled the marriage certificate out of my pocket. I tore it up and left it on the kitchen table, along with the only picture we all had from vacation at Disneyland. It was a wonderful time, with many happy memories. I wonder if she thought the same thing. I got in the car and drove away. When I got to the end of the street, I saw Holly and Jennifer arriving at the house in the rearview mirror. Neither of them looked up. They just ran to the house. I turned off the phone, smiled, and walked away. The TR was practically empty as I drove to my new home. For some reason, I couldn't shake the fear that gripped me. I knew this wouldn't be the last time I would see Holly, and once my plan went through, she would do anything to chase me down and make me pay. That was the kind of person she was. I also knew it would involve the girls, and I didn't want them affected by our problems, especially as they needed to focus on their studies. I was in Sutton at 4 p.m. and decided I had time to visit the local phone and get a new cell phone contract. I also managed to meet the admin team at work processing my P45 and met Frey, my new receptionist. She was quite young, but maintained a very professional attitude, a complete contrast to Olivia. I returned to my new apartment, which was completely empty, had water and electricity. So I found a teapot I had brought from home and made a cup of tea. moved things around and ordered a pizza. Grabbed my old cell phone and turned it on. The connection was broken. I smiled to myself, knowing that Holly was now without a phone as well, and that should give the girls a break before I could talk to them. I found my sleeping bag and spread it out in the living room and waited for dinner. I was supposed to have some furniture delivered over the weekend, but for now at least, I was glad to be away from Holly. I turned on my laptop and found the voice recordings I had made in Jack Walker's office. I downloaded the content and listened to it for incriminating evidence of his infidelity towards Olivia. I took 2 USB drives and made multiple copies. I wrote down the addresses of Margaret Walker, Jack's wife, and Peter Lewis, Olivia's boyfriend, and then inserted a storage device into each. I will send them tomorrow before work. I finally decided to call my daughter Sophie to give her the latest news, and so she wouldn't tell her mother where I was. To my surprise, she admitted that she hadn't even spoken to her mother yet. But of course, my guess is, she didn't have a phone to do it in a week. I had time to furnish my apartment, and with no time to waste at work, I contacted the clients of Walker Engineering and convinced them to switch to Sutton. They saw what we were offering and very quickly jumped ship. A couple of people decided to stay with Jack, but most hated him, but tolerated him because of the superior products we offered. I knew Jack wouldn't understand right away, because his company was losing clients, but I didn't care. I also knew that now that my old house had all utilities turned off, Holly would realize she wasn't coming back. There was no way she could pay the bills, so I knew Toby could safely begin the selling process. Sarah was more than happy to take on the task, and by the end of the week the signs were up in the house. It was at this point that Abba contacted me. Apparently Holly had moved back to her parents' house, and they were not happy that their little princess had gone rogue. Holly, of course, was out for my blood and was furious at what I had done to her strangely. I found great satisfaction in that, but I knew it wasn't over yet. For the weekend I was invited to another dinner at Toby's house, and Sarah told me that Ami would be there, and that she had asked about me. Sarah learned that she had been divorced a few years ago, and had been single since her husband left her a year before the divorce. Apparently the divorce went well. She got the house and full custody of the kids, as well as financial support. Unfortunately, I had been skeptical of men since. So Sarah told her about my situation, and she had wanted to meet me ever since. So they planned this dinner. She was 2 years younger than me, with 2 older teenage children. I felt like I was being set up, but decided it couldn't hurt. The dinner was a success, and I felt completely relaxed for the first time since I had thought about running away from Holly. I understood what was going on. She didn't pressure me or let me know she liked me. We got drunk, danced together, and at the end of the night we exchanged numbers. She told me to call if I needed someone to talk to, and I was grateful I slept in the spare room at Toby's house, but I was finding it harder and harder to fight off the hangover, and coffee wasn't helping. Sunday morning brought good news. Just a week after putting it up for sale, I received 2 serious offers. One of them I accepted straight away for £550,000. I knew it might be some time before the deal was finalized, but I accepted the money as soon as it was ready. I would open an ISA in the girls' names and then ask Toby to distribute. It was the amount remaining between numerous investment funds. I would also pay him back and take some cash to keep in a safe at home. I still felt the need to protect myself. Another week went by, and I was glad hearing from Toby that the sale could be very quick. I contacted the moving company and instructed them to vacate my old house. The girls called their mother and asked if she needed anything, and she got even more angry and threatening. I promised the girls that it would all be over soon. Tuesday morning, I was talking to one of our new clients who was meeting with Jack Walker about a possible extension of the supply contract. He told Jack he was moving to Sutton Engineering, and Jack was not surprised. He learned that Walker Engen Iron had to cut 50% of their staff due to layoffs. He also informed me that Mrs. Walker was divorced. Jack. For adultery, no. I felt absolutely no sympathy as I counted the commission checks in my head as we talked. I had no idea what had happened to Olivia and her boyfriend, but I knew he got my presents and Mrs. Walker got hers. And although he didn't, I'm sure he was very, very aware of why Mrs. Walker was divorcing her husband. I wonder what her friends and family would think about her cheating with an older man to make up for it. My new job, I was given a brand new Land Rover Discovery, HSS already. I was thinking of treating myself, but Robert and the bosses were so happy with me, and how the company was progressing, that they gave me the car, and a few thousand in commission. Actually, it was over £30,000. I was looking out of my office window admiring my new car when a Ford Focus Estate pulled into the car park. I froze, realizing who the car belonged to. It was Diana's car, Holly's mum. I sat back in my chair and waited for the call. Inevitably, the phone rang in my office and I picked it up. "Mr. Price, there's a woman sitting in the waiting room who claims to be your wife," said Frey, my secretary. "Tell her I have a meeting and I'll be down in an hour." I answered 3 hours later. I looked out the window and she was still sitting there, exhaling loudly, and I decided to leave for the night. If she saw me, I'd have to deal with it, and if not, I'd just drive past it. Wasn't like I knew which car to pay attention to. I walked out the side door and headed to my car. I was about to get in my car when I heard tires screeching, and before I knew she had arrived and was blocking my way, she jumped out of the car and walked up to me with a face like thunder. She looked like a mess. Her clothes were clearly her sister's, and her hair looked like it hadn't been brushed in weeks. "You're a bastard!" she yelled, throwing a slap in my direction, but she missed. "I hate you. I hate you. Yeah, I hate you too, Holly. Now say what you want to say, and then get out of my life," I said, trying to stay calm. She just looked at me with tears rolling down her cheeks. "You ruined my life, you bastard," she whispered pitifully. I didn't say anything, I just kept listening. "You destroyed all my belongings, my wedding dress, and up until now it was all about her, and I wasn't surprised. And then you cancel and force me to move in with Mom and Dad." She continued. She just looked at me and waited for me to speak. "Is that all? Holly? I asked, you don't have anything to say for yourself." She screamed herself. I thought for a second before I invited her to get in my car. She was shocked, but I didn't want to be a public spectacle anymore. As we sat down, I saw how badly Lucia seemed to have aged, and I wondered if all that, plus the venereal disease, had affected her appearance. "Please come home, Alex. Can we put all this behind us?" "I forgive you," she said. What did she just say? My ears deceive me. "Do you forgive me?" I asked, hoping I misunderstood. "Yes, Alex, I will forgive you for destroying my stuff and my life," she said. "You're delusional, Holly," I asked. She just looked at me like I was crazy. "You openly cheat on me and disrespect me when I give you everything, and you have the audacity to say you forgive me. But I thought, no, Holly. You're just thinking about yourself. I'll never get back with you. So go and stay with one of your lovers," I said coldly. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair, and I realized, I guess once, you suddenly became single. They didn't need you anymore. I asked. They accused me of giving them an STD, and they said I was just having fun. They said they'd never want me as a girlfriend, because I'm a traitor. For a second, I even thought I was cruel. But she had already set her own trap. Well, that was obvious, Holly. So go find someone else. My friends started treating me differently now that we're over, and their husbands have started to question their fidelity. Which means I've been cast aside. I can be a bad influence if you can believe it. The word separation stuck in my head. I knew it meant I was still connected to her, and I felt sad. My parents are disgusted, and everyone in town has heard about my venereal disease. No doubt thanks to my so-called friends and lovers. And now some of the factory employees have lost their jobs, and that is my fault too. She confessed. The truth was that she herself was partly responsible for all the bad things that had happened to her, but I felt sympathy for her. She had screwed up and was paying the price. But what a great price it was. She had a beautiful life, and she ruined it out of greed and disrespect. However, I knew I had to move on with my life. I have nothing left, Alex. I need you and I want you back in my life. She pleaded. I have no money. I have no job. When will I get my share of the house here? It is. You have never told me you love me. You just need me, Holly, and I don't need you as far as the house is concerned. No, I paid the mortgage and lost it. I lied. Her eyes opened wide and her jaw dropped. She was shocked at my words, but at least she knew how this visit would end. I want a divorce. I said, no, please, Alex. Of course I love you, over 20 years together, and I made one small mistake and you are ruining me, a very big, unforgivable mistake. Holly, and I will never come home to you. I pleaded. Please, Alex, screamed, and her screams echoed throughout the car. I need a clean break, and if you agree, I will give you £30,000 cash, I offered. I watched her face change and the tears were replaced by a new one. I determined not to scream. I will fight you for everything and more. Alex, you have no money. Holly and I will move my assets so much that I will spend a fortune trying to find the money. I am smart. So, by the time your lawyer finds it, you will have racked up a bill that will negate any benefit. I suggest you take the money. What am I offering you, or I will give it away too? It's up to you, I said firmly, keeping my eyes on her. You bastard. I loved you and gave you children, and this is how you treat me, she said angrily. Thanks to me, our daughters will go far. They won't be liars and cheats. They will be selfless, not selfish like their mother. So take the money and get out of my life. My anger was starting to surface, and she looked at me like I was a stranger. Okay. Yeah, I'll take the money and accept the divorce. Okay, I'll arrange it, I said. Feeling a weight lift off my shoulders with those words, she got out of my car and slammed the door shut. A few seconds later, she bolted out of the parking lot. The next day, I filed for divorce on the grounds of adultery. And a week later, I agreed to meet Holly at the girl's apartment. The sale of my house went through, but I wouldn't put any money into it until the papers were signed. We tried to be polite in front of the girls, but I wouldn't. It was easy. I handed the money to Jolly and she signed the papers. I kissed the girls and wished Holly good luck as I was about to leave. She burst into tears again, but I got the feeling it was for the girls. Benefit Sophie and Abba looked at me and raised their eyebrows. They knew. I'll see you next weekend. Dad, Abba said as she walked towards the door. I walked back into the room. She was still sobbing, and no one was paying attention to her. Suddenly, I realized what Abba meant. So the Coldplay concert. Everyone is looking forward to it. We'll meet you in London. Or will we go, and? Sophie asked. I'll talk to Ami and I'll let you know during the week, I said one last time before I left. As I walked out the door, I heard Jolly shouting something, but I chose to ignore him and left.